Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Morning Musings. Happy Tuesday morning to you. And yeah, I really am reading the Jewish temple imagery in the book of Revelation because I'm doing a series on the last trumpet and the last day resurrection found in 1 Corinthians chapter 15. And you know what's amazing to me? The imagery of the last trumpet is certainly discussed or certainly connected with the Jewish feast days. The sounding of the trumpet for the feast days, it has to do with Rosh Hashanah. That's the Feast of Trumpets. And it has to do with Sukkot, the Feast of Ingathering, the Feast of Harvest. Because, for instance, during the Feast of Harvest, which is the last feast day, the priest would walk around the altar every day to the sounding of a trumpet, a single blast. But on the very last day of the feast, guess what? They would sound the trumpet 7 times. Yeah, reminiscent of the destruction and the fall of Jericho. That's why it was done. But as they walked around the altar, they would say, "Save, Lord, save us now." Here is the sounding of the trumpet. And again, absolutely inextricably bound up with the feast day imagery. And yet here, Robert Briggs, and look, this is a very helpful, very insightful book in many, many ways. I literally, however, am blown away by the fact that he does not discuss the festal imagery of the book of Revelation, since festal imagery permeates the book of Revelation. But I digress. Okay, but I was genuinely reading that this morning. Okay, we are continuing our discussion in Matthew 25, 1-13, how Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is like. Well, the kingdom of heaven is like Son of Man coming for the wedding. The kingdom of heaven is like the coming of the Son of Man for the kingdom. In the kingdom. So, as I have been sharing with you, point number 1, to ignore, to overlook, or even to deny that this imagery of the coming of the Lord for the wedding is directly related to the fulfillment of God's Old Covenant promises made to Old Covenant Israel is an absolute hermeneutical fallacy, and it is a fatal fallacy. Look, I was raised in a theological environment that said God was through with Israel at the cross. Jesus nailed the law of Moses, the entire Old Testament, to the cross. That's the standard amillennial view. Many postmillennialists share the same view, and then they turn around and they contradict it. But all of that said, okay? And many years ago, in my eschatological struggles, I was studying one day, and I was studying on the resurrection. I'll never forget this. I was looking at Acts chapter 24, 14, and 15, where Paul, standing on trial, said, "This I confess to you, that after the way that they call, that is, the Pharisees, that they call a sect, so worship I the God of my fathers, believing all things that are written in the law and the prophets, that there is about to be resurrection of the dead, both the just and the unjust." And I'm going, I thought my head was going to explode. It was absolutely unbelievable how I felt at that moment. This happened, by the way, in Shawnee, Oklahoma, where I ministered for 11 years. And I sat there and I thought, wait a minute, Don. If God was through with Israel at the cross, if God nailed the entire Old Testament to the cross, how could Paul, years after the cross, still be looking for the fulfillment of the Old Covenant promises made to Old Covenant Israel? That doesn't jive. And I want to tell you, I caught the power of that. And again, I cannot tell you what a powerful moment that was in my life. And I have been challenging opponents, the opponents of covenant eschatology, with that fact ever since. when they want to put biblical eschatology at the end of the Christian age, in the fulfillment of new covenant promises, divorce from Israel, divorce from the old covenant, I challenge them to show where their eschatology is different from Paul's eschatology, or where Paul's eschatology is not the hope of Israel, even though he said repeatedly that he preached nothing but what was found in Moses, the law, and the prophets. Acts 26, 21 and following. Acts 26, 6 and following. On and on. Folks, this is huge. And as I continue to say, you must catch the power of this. Well, I've been sharing with you over the last several weeks this imagery of the wedding. How God divorced Israel, God would remarry Israel in the last days. That's what Matthew 25, 1 and following is about. By the way, scholars such as N.T. Wright acknowledge this. They see that Matthew 25, 1 and following is about the return of the Lord to remarry Israel. Now, does he follow through logically and consistently with his comments? No, he doesn't. That's not the point. The point is he recognizes that Matthew 25, 1 to 13 is about the return of the Lord for the remarriage of Israel. Now, again, Jesus says the kingdom of heaven is like. So we cannot divorce the coming of the Lord for the wedding from the coming of the Lord from the kingdom. And with the kingdom or in the kingdom. You can't divide those. And I have to tell you that when you look at the similarities, not just similarities, the identicality of what we find in Matthew chapter 25 in Jesus' teaching about the coming of the Son of Man and the concept of the kingdom, it's mind-boggling. Let's go back to Matthew 16, 27 and 28 very quickly. You have the coming of the Son of Man with the angels in power and great glory, in judgment, in the kingdom, in the lifetime of that first century. Now look, amillennial writer after amillennial writer, postmillennial writer after postmillennial writer says, oh yeah, that happened in AD 70. Okay. So in Matthew 16, 27 and 28, you have the coming of the Son of Man with his angels in judgment, in glory, in the kingdom, in that generation. In Matthew 24, 29 to 34, you have the coming of the Son of Man on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory with the angels to gather the elect. What is that? That's the kingdom. And it would be in that generation. In Matthew 25, 1 to 13, you have the coming of the Son of Man for the wedding, which is the time of the kingdom. And then, I'm jumping ahead of myself right here, all right? Jumping ahead of myself to a passage we're going to discuss at length later on. But in Matthew 25, when the Son of Man comes in his glory. Okay, wait a minute. Matthew 16, 27, 28. The coming of the Son of Man and the glory of the Father. Now, are you going to divorce the glory of the Father from the glory of Christ? Where's that dichotomy found in Scripture? Well, it's not, because the Father gave the judgment prerogative, the authority, the power, and the glory to His Son, John 5, 21 and following. So, Matthew 16, 27, 28, Matthew 24, 29 to 34. Oh, by the way, the coming of the Son of Man with His angels, with the sound of a trumpet, to gather the elect in that generation was the time of the kingdom, as we saw yesterday, Luke 21, 20 to 31. Oh, verse 32, in that generation. Okay? So Matthew 25, 31 and following, when the Son of Man comes in His glory and all the holy angels with Him. Now, let me ask you, is this a different coming of the Lord with the angels from Matthew 16, 27? Is it a different coming of the Lord with the angels from Matthew 24, verse 30? Is it? Where's the proof of it? Well, I'll tell you what the proof is. Proof, The proof that is offered is, you got to remember, the Olivet Discourse is divided. No, that's presupposition. It's a prejudiced presupposition. You have to prove that. You can't just claim it. And when Jesus, in Matthew 16, 27, 28, when Jesus in Matthew 24, 29 to 34, paralleled with Luke 21, posits this coming of the Lord with his angels in power, great glory, and the kingdom, then you, those who say, Matthew 25, 31, and 5, now that's different. That's different. This is the coming of the Lord at the end of the Christian age. This is the coming of the Lord for a wedding that must be different from the coming of the Lord for the wedding in the first century. Oh, you're going to say there are two weddings now. No. When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the holy angels with him, then he will sit on the throne of his glory. We're told in a misconstrual, in a misinterpretation of 1 Corinthians chapter 15, he must reign until he has put all enemies under his feet, where we are told that means Christ stops reigning. He puts an end to his throne, to his glory, to his kingdom. No, he doesn't. He delivers it to the Father, to be sure, but that means he sits down with the Father on the throne, and they rule and reign together. Revelation 22:3. There's one throne, and the Father and the Son on that one throne. There is no abdication at the coming of the Lord. But watch this. If you say that 1 Corinthians 15 is abdication, then Matthew 25:31 is clearly not an abdication. It is him sitting on the throne of his glory. And as William Bell loves to say, this is when Jesus sits on the throne, not when he quits the throne. So if you're going to insist that Matthew chapter 25 is end of the Christian age, then you're going to create an absolute irreconcilable contrast with your interpretation of 1 Corinthians 15, which says, he quits the throne at that time. Sorry, doesn't work. Matthew 25:31 is clearly, undeniably Matthew 16, 27, and 28, which was AD 70. It is undeniably Matthew chapter 24, 29 to 34, which was AD 70. And since Matthew 25:31 and following is so clearly Matthew 24, 29 and following, that means the coming of the Lord for the time of the wedding, the time of the kingdom, was AD 70, and any claim, all claims to a divided Olivet Discourse goes up in flames. Or if you want to put it like this, it melts before our very eyes and disappears. Hey, thanks for joining me for this morning's Morning Musings. Don't forget the March 2021 3-book special. Go to my website, DonKPreston.com, BibleProphecy.com. Take advantage of it. Not many days left in this month, and you don't want to miss out. Okay? Thanks again for joining me. I'll see you on the flip side.